So, hello everyone, this is Jan, and again today I'm with Jurica. Hello Jurica.
Hello Jan, hello everybody.
Okay, we are going to cover the fourth and final part of our first Chessable course. And if you don't know what Chessable is, I cannot assume that everyone looked the first three or watched the first three parts. I have to explain it again. So, Chessable is an online website where you can go through courses. And as you see here, Beginner's Guide to Chess Strategy or the Positional Chess Patterns Manual and so on. And then it's basically like reading a book, but in a more convenient way because it's assisted digitally by giving you positions, videos in there, and so on. So it's a nice service. And they have the Move Trainer. The Move Trainer is a system where, basically they ask you questions like what is the best move for white, and you try to give your best answer. If it's correct, it will put the question, into the bag, I'd say. So it is not going to be presented again until like a week or 2 weeks. And if you answered something wrong, it's going to be given to you like right again, like 2 hours, 3 hours. Then if you do it correct, 6 hours, 8 hours, and so on. That way they make sure that the things where you have problems, where you struggled, are more often in your short-term memory until it gets into the long-term memory. So that's a really nice and efficient way to learn. And today's course, as in the last three parts, is a free course. We are going to choose it here from the options, free course. Scrolling all the way up, and it is this one here. I click on it. And it is Everything You Need to Know About Chess by Danny Rensch. And the course is basically a beginner's course, like a real beginner's course. What you learned in the first chapter was the language of chess and how to identify pieces, squares, and other elements of the chessboard, and then how each piece moves. Yeah, so really learn chess from scratch by a master. And it is a really nice way how he presents it, very clear structured, and basically I think everybody can learn chess if you watch this, the videos, and read the written material that comes with the course. And just go to part 1, 2, 3 that we covered the last 3 times and take a look. So I'm going to take a slow approach. I believe you can just watch the videos and it will be perfectly fine. But for me, it's my favorite learning method, as everyone knows who watched the first parts, is repetition. So I'm going to go through the written materials, and then I answer the questions given to that. And after that, for the first repetition or second repetition, then we watch the video that is given together. And that way we make our way through the course. And yeah, that's basically my explanations for now. What I again like to do is I'd like to see where am I in the standings, because there is a gamification aspect here. I click on browse.
973.
Yes.
Yes? I was guessing. Let's see. No, it's not Chessbra. I thought it's Chessbra here. Right.
Okay, here I'm back again. Sorry for the short break. And Cold Free Octopus is still leading, and I'm in 934th position, having 16,000 points. Okay, whenever you answered correctly, you get experience points, as they call it here, and move up the ladder, probably. So, with that, we covered already the introduction, and if you're new to Chessable, they explain what Chessable is. Then learning the game, the opening, yesterday, tactics and strategy. And I'm a Lichess rated player with a rating of classical 1750. And I learned something yesterday. And if I remember correct, that was the outpost. And an outpost is if your piece is supported by a pawn and cannot be taken by an enemy pawn. That's what I learned yesterday. So, yeah, let's go straight into the review. We always start with the review because once you stop learning, they will just collect the questions for you that you need to review. And every time you go to Chessable again, a green square comes up with how many questions they'll give you this time. It's 24, and we start with this before we go to the endgame. So, tactics, double attack, white to play. And for the review, I don't explain. So please, if you have trouble solving these here with me together, then go to the part 3 for the tactics, part 2 for the openings, I guess, and part 1 for learning how the pieces move and everything else for the basic rules. Okay, so no explanation here, just solving so that we can straight into the learning of the, what was it again? Ending is today, yes. So, white to play double attack. I play Rook f7. It's correct, completed, and it shows that I attack no explaining. Okay, next variation. Double attack, and it is knight to e7. And now take the queen. Good, completed. Next variation, it's an absolute pin. And the absolute pin was, I believe it is bishop to b5. Then I have 2 pins. And yes, that's correct. Next one. Relative pin now, and that was the bishop to g5. Also correct. I pinned the knight and can now take the queen. Got 40 points, as you see in the bottom here. Next variation is relative pin in the queen's gambit. So here I have to do several moves, and let's go. The queen's gambit starts with d4. Now the gambit offer, which is c4, it's declined. And now I'm going to play knight c3. Now comes the pin. Yes, that's correct. Okay. So basically here I learned my first openings, except for the openings that I normally play. This was the queen's gambit. Next variation. So skewer. Skewer is this. Yes, worked, and take. Okay. Next variation is a deadly rook skewer, and that is the rook to e1. Yes, and checkmate, back rank checkmate. So what's next? Skewer, the infamous endgame skewer. Yeah, here I can promote to a queen, and then just take the queen because the king has to move out of the way. You can see we are left with 16 review positions, so we work our way down to 0 and then start with the learning again. So, white to play discovery, and the discovery here is, I have 2 options, I think. One option is bishop to f5, and the other one would be bishop to g2, and I'm going to go with f5. That is correct, 40 points, and now the king had to move and I can take the queen. Okay. then this time I have to be careful because the queen is attacking our attacker. So I need to make sure that the queen cannot take my rook. That's why I need to go f2 with the bishop, giving check and an additional attack on the queen. 40 points, nice, and now I can take the queen. Next variation is turning the tables on a relative pin. Black to play. Here we are. I'm pinned. And the knight gives check, and then I have a free move basically and can take with the queen. Exactly. All right, so next one, support mate, and a support mate is this here. Yes, king supports the queen, cannot be taken, checkmate. White to play, support mate number 2. Same thing, but just this time the knight protects the queen. Support mate number 3. White to play. Here I have a bishop, and if I take with the queen on h7, it's a support mate. Yes, it is. Okay, so back rank mate, white to play. Quite easy one. It's rook to e8 and checkmate. Next variation, back rank with queen sacrifice. Okay. Here it is first giving check, then the rook takes the queen, and I can take with my rook, and then we have a back rank mate. Okay. White to play, outposts. Here the outposts are coming. Okay, so the knight goes to d5. The knight is supported by 2 pawns in this case and cannot be taken by an opponent's pawn because the c pawn and e pawn already moved past their attacking position for d4, which would have been c6 and e6. Okay. Yep. And now there was a tactic here. I would have been able to take the b6 pawn, and if he takes with the pawn, I can run through with the pawn to promote. But as he took the bishop for protection of the b6 pawn, he has a weak pawn on f6. It is already attacked by the knight. And if I bring the king to g7, we have a double attack on that pawn, and the king cannot come in for help because e6 is protected by our pawn and e7 by the knight. So that's correct. Then we have active piece versus passive piece. White to play. And this one is rook to d7. That is the active piece. And it forces the rook to go to f8. And there it just needs to stay and is very passive. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
just one thing about rook d7 also. If we also have endgames today, rook endgames are most common, and one very useful rule for rook endgames is actually that seventh rank is usually actually a dream rank, and 7th rank is usually the goal, the target. So rook d7 with that rule is quite naturally here, and yeah, of course it's the best move. I just want to say that.
Yeah, thank you for reminding. And I also, what I forgot also, I mean, I didn't say it, but I also forgot. It is that the white rook is on the open file, which, makes it just, very active. And it's the ideal place for the rook. Okay, thank you. And now I need to find the next move. And that was bringing the king in for attack on the c6 and a5 pawns. So that is the next move. And now I am attacked by the king, and I can go to a7 and have an attack on, well, a5 and f7. Also the king can move to get the pawn on c6. So that's all good. Next variation. Should white retreat the bishop, or is there something stronger? Okay, the bishop is attacked by h6, and the stronger move is a double attack, a fork by the knight. The knight jumps to e7, giving check and attacking the queen. So we win the queen here. Nice. We have 5 more to go. White to play and put the attacking potential of the knight and queen duo on full display. So that was a checkmate by queen e8. Checkmate, yes. Next variation is which unassuming move both activates one of white's pieces and shuts down one of black's. As we did this yesterday, I remember, without really checking the board and seeing what it is, I still remember it is c5. So instead of only playing the move and getting over it, for me it's always important in the review to again understand why this is the move Chessable is looking for. So I should activate one of my pieces and shut down one of black's. So if I bring the pawn to c5, I attack the bishop. My pawn is protected by the b4 pawn, so he has to move. He cannot go to a5, but needs to go back to a7, and basically is just restricted in movement and space, and yeah, that's just making him pretty inactive, or shuts him down. And the pawn move to c5 just opens up for my bishop, so he gets the full diagonal and already taking an X-ray look to the king. Okay, so that was correct. Would have been pretty embarrassing if that would be the wrong move then. Okay, so next. Early castling in the Ruy-Lopez. So they now ask me to play the Ruy-Lopez variation here. And I remember that started with e4, and here I really have to guess. I believe it is bringing the knight out. Yes. And if you noticed, it said overstudied instead of giving points. So what was next here? Ruy-Lopez. It was the bishop to b5, I think. Let's check. Yes, it's correct. Now this one, and here, as it says early castling, I probably castle. And I have the same problem as yesterday, so it's good that I repeat this here. Okay, and it's just a variation of the Ruy-Lopez Jurica said yesterday. I'm happy to understand just this variation. Okay. 2 more, and learn the Queen's Gambit. White to play Queen's Gambit. Again, repetition, we already did that. I'm faster now. And here it's bringing out the knight, I think. It's an alternative. So what is the better move? Dum, 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 dum. Queen's Gambit. Is that castling to the queen side? I don't know the next move. So what is the next move? Yesterday, it's funny. Yesterday I got it. So let me think. This is this. I should open up the way for my bishop maybe by putting the pawn to e3. Let's see. Yes, that was correct. Now I bring out the bishop, or first the knight. I think first the bishop. That was incorrect. It was the knight. Okay. So what did he say? It has nothing to, but here is the option, of course. And it is a problem of move order, I guess. So, yes, I will probably get that move in the next review session a little more than before because I put it wrong, which is good, so I learned it. We go next, and now as I answered it wrong, it directly asks me to do this 3 times. Okay, so I think it was the knight move, and it's correct. Again, the knight move, and again, the knight move. Okay. Next variation and last variation for the review session, the dream opening practice. Here it is being presented so that black is not moving, and I move only white pieces. So if black is not moving, what is a dream opening? It is first the pawns controlling the center, then it's knights before bishops, also center control and getting them out. Now the bishops, and then it is bring in the queen to prepare to castle queenside. So that was e2 for the queen or d2, I forgot, but I just move and see what happens. Yes, it was e2. And now the queenside castling. Okay. Exit, nothing to review. And if you see part 3, yesterday I did all moves correct and I had 18 hours before I needed to review. And as I did one move wrong, it now is telling me your next review of this course is due in 3 hours. If you do mistakes, they present it earlier to you again. So the more it gets into your short-term memory, hopefully, it will go into your long-term memory, which is a nice learning effect, of course. Okay, exit. Okay, and before we go into the course, I just take a quick look here. That's all fine, and we start right away. Okay, so going into the endgame. And yeah, basically you have a look at, you can have a look at this. It shows the variations that are coming up. I prefer to click on learn, as this gives you the course material on the left column. And yeah, we now start. So what do we have here? Endgame checkmates ladder mate. Black's move is 6 king c7 from b7. Welcome to the endgame chapter of our course. The endgame is defined as the last portion of a chess game when there are relatively few pieces left on the board. The endgame comes with its own set of strategic principles and techniques you need to finish off your opponent. Let's start with the basic checkmate techniques in the endgame. One of the most important and useful checkmates to know is the ladder mate, carried out by 2 rooks against the lone king. There is an easy technique to follow to execute ladder mate. Let's take a look. Your move is rook h7 check. Okay, white can already deliver checkmate in 2 moves from this position. With both rooks safe, far away from the enemy king, we resume the ladder technique. Don't panic if you give a check with a wrong rook at any point, such as rook g7. Yeah, it's easy to reset the ladder like so. Here, the black king had a rescue rank, and we can just reset it by putting the rook on g6, and now the king has only 2 ranks left to go, and it is forced to go there or another one of the 7th rank, and now we fulfill the check. So now the king has only the last rank left, and so on. Okay, so basically he has now 3 squares to go to: c8, d8, e8, And if he goes there, we just move the rook on the g file to g8, and it's checkmate. Nowhere to go for the king. White to play. Check. And checkmate. Okay. There are no more ranks for the king to run to, and rooks control all the escape squares of the black king. Sometimes you need to carry out the ladder mate all the way up the board. We encourage you to play through the variation from start to finish to see how this checkmate occurs from start to finish. Mastering this checkmating pattern is fundamental. To your ability to win games, practice it more on chess.com. Okay, we are not going to do this today, but if you get the course by yourself, we of course encourage you to do so. Okay, next. Here again the repetition. Checkmate, white to play, forcing the king to go to the last rank, the 8th rank, and checkmate. Okay, and again, and again. Okay, nice. So we got this, and I believe there's a video about it by Danny, so we start watching the video.
First position is known
as
the ladder
bring it up,
checkmate.
and then we are
It
going
seems
to
easy
restart.
enough,
Hold on,
and you
guys.
can rest assured that it is. But it's super
I put
important
it
to know how
here,
to coordinate
and
and
then
use
put it
two
here.
rooks, or in some cases
Yeah,
a
that's good
queen
enough,
and a rook,
and we
to
go back and
checkmate
start.
Welcome to the Everything You Need to Know About Chess video series, the Endgame edition. At this point, you know how to play. You've learned about the first stage of the game, called the opening. You've seen all types of tactics and strategies, often those types of things occurring in the middle game. But the end game is defined as we're only down to a few pieces remaining. There are some very common checkmate patterns we have to master if we're going to be a good endgame player. We have to learn the value of a passed pawn and how to use king and pawn opposition. And ultimately, we have to understand that in the endgame, perhaps the most defining difference from any other stage is that your king is a very important, valuable, and fighting piece. Let's dive into some of the basic checkmate patterns you have to know in order to understand how to play and win chess endgames. This first position is known as the ladder checkmate. It seems easy enough, and you can rest assured that it is. But it's super important to know how to coordinate and use two rooks, or in some cases a queen and a rook, to checkmate the enemy king by force. This position is called a ladder because white's pieces are set up to perfectly, step by step, move up the ladder of the chessboard, ultimately forcing the king to the back rank and checkmating him where he stands. Let's see how it works in real time. The white rooks move ahead, checking the king and forcing him back. Note that it was never an option to move the king forward because the rook previous to the rook that you moved was shielding, creating a force field for that black king to never cross again. Ultimately, as long as we lead the ladder with the rook that is farthest away from the black king, i.e. in this case the rook on a4 versus the closer rook on the 5th rank, we will always be doing the ladder checkmate correctly. We move the rooks up the board, and if the king gets too close, we can switch to the other half, resetting our rooks, and then getting right back to the ladder checkmate, making sure we move the rook that is furthest away from the enemy king. If you ever mess up and move the wrong rook, and the king gets out, don't panic, just move the same rook you did right back. The king will have to go back, and you'll finish the ladder, and ultimately win the game with a very easy ladder checkmate. Our next example is much more difficult than the two.
Much more difficult. Oh my goodness. Let's see what comes. And thank you, Jenny, of course, for the nice explanation. So, endgame checkmates, the queen checkmate. Now let's learn the most important checkmating technique in chess, the queen mate. It's the most important checkmate because the endgame, often having a single pawn against your opponent's lone king, is enough to win the game. This is because every pawn has the potential to promote to a queen to which to deliver checkmate, with which to deliver checkmate. It is tougher than a ladder mate, but there is a clear technique to follow. Let's see it in action. The move is queen d4. Stage 1 is to repeatedly move your queen in knight's checking distance away from the enemy king. Doing so will create an impassable barrier shown in green that will gradually become smaller and smaller until finally the enemy king finds itself at the edge of the board. It doesn't matter which edge it is. If your queen was a knight in this position, it would be giving check. This means we are following the correct technique. Let's continue. The L position, check. Okay. By the way, this is interesting. If I have this position, I intuitively do it correct. I didn't know that it is the knight shape with the L. So I really didn't know that. Interesting. Okay. So white to play, I need to put it to the knight's checking position and restricting the movement of the black king with a barrier, like here and here. Okay. So now the king moved away to king f5, trying to stay in the middle of the board. As in the middle of the board, it cannot be checkmate with just king and queen. Your move is queen e3. As described, we are repeating the process of giving a knight's check with the queen over and over. Notice the barrier becoming smaller each time. Yes, correct. Now the black king has less squares to go to. I mean, he has still the same number of squares to go to, but the general area becomes smaller and forcing it to go to the edge of the board. Let's continue. White to play. Again, I need to give the horse check. Okay, did that. And here you just repeat it and see the space for the black king becomes even smaller, and it's I'm distracted because this is really new to me. This is interesting, but just for me, I guess. Okay, so that's good. Okay, next. White to play, check. Okay, and here this is so interesting. I really never did that. I always brought in the king first and then working together. Just doing the restriction of the black's king with the queen. First time I see it and learn it. It's good, nice. Okay, so the black king retreats to king h7. We are continuing with the knight's check, and here the knight check is given, and the black king now has only the h8, and stage 1 is complete with this. We know this because the enemy king is on the edge of the board. It is important not to get closer with the queen anymore, and instead begin stage 2, bring the king over. Okay, here we see its way. First the knight check again. He has to go to the only possible square, h8, and now we are going to bring in the king with f3. The king makes his way to his royal counterpart to give a support mate. Attention, do not play queen g6 here. We learned it in part 2. The game would end with a draw. Notice how there are no legal moves for the enemy king, but it's not in check. Okay, I moved queen g6. Where to go with the only piece on the board? The king cannot go on g8. That would be check by the queen, and you're not allowed to put yourself into check. g7, same thing, and h7, same thing. So that would be a stalemate, nowhere to go for the king. Okay, and this is not preferred outcome for white. Every chess player should be angry about him or herself if that happens, because this is so easy to see. But in Blitz games, it still happens very often. Everyone is in time trouble, just moving fast, and Okay, nice. Bringing in the king here. Bringing in the king. And black has no option than moving back and forth between the two possible squares for him. Okay, still bringing it in. Now the king is in place, and next move we can deliver mate on g7 with the queen. Black cannot take the queen because it's supported by the king, and then we have a nice checkmate, or support checkmate in this case. Okay, notice the king's invaluable role in assisting this queen. Usually pieces need to work together to deliver checkmate. We recommend practicing this checkmate against yourself or a friend until it becomes second nature. And there's an option to do so on chess.com versus the computer, I believe. All right. So, do I have practice moves here? Yes, I do. White to play. It is support checkmate with queen g7. Okay. And here it starts the whole sequence from the start. I know that I need to give the knights check. I do this here. Then again the knights check. And again the knights check. And again the knights check. And if I put the queen on g6, giving another knight's check, it's stalemate and a draw because of that. Nowhere to go for the king, which is not in check. So now it's time to bring in the king. Black has to move back and forth. And here I'm in the position now to give the support checkmate. And it's correct. Okay, I have to repeat this so it becomes second nature. Check, 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 stop because of the stalemate. Now bringing the king in. Okay, and checkmate. Okay, nice. So now we are again taking a look at the video. As Danny said, when I remember correctly, this is a difficult one.
2 rook ladder checkmate, but it's arguably much more important. The king and queen checkmate means that you can actually win chess games with just a king and a pawn. When you get a pawn to the other side of the board, the piece you normally choose to promote to is a queen. So making sure you can checkmate with a lone king and queen is the first step toward endgame mastery. This checkmate is all about using the queen in the right way. By moving the queen a knight's check away from the king, imagine this was a knight, you would be checking and attacking the black king. You've actually formed an invisible box and a cage that is only going to get smaller for the black king as long as you continue to follow the knight's check pattern. After the king moves, you move a knight's check away, continuing to make the box smaller no matter what, in either files or rank. It's important to show that if you did not move the queen a knight's check away, that you would actually not be making the box or the cage any smaller. A lot of beginners simply check the king, and they check the king back and forth. Maybe they choose to check the king on a different square. But no matter what you do, if you're checking the king randomly, you're not actually making the box or your job of checkmating the king any easier. It's important to understand that in order to win the game, you must first trap the king and make his options smaller and smaller, less and less. Back to the idea of trapping the king a knight's check away. We move the queen forward, always a knight's check, and no matter what, the box will either get smaller in terms of rank or in terms of file. Let's see it in action. The king moves, we move a knight's check away. The king moves backward, we move a knight's check away, just one square at a time. No matter what black does, we are either making the box smaller in terms of file or in terms of rank. Eventually, the king will touch down on either the file furthest to the edge of the board or the rank furthest to the edge of the board. In either of these cases, once we've put the king on either the back rank or the furthest file, it's important that we don't move any closer with the queen. Moving one more step and staying the knight's check pattern would actually lead to stalemate. Here the king is trapped, but unable to move to safety without being in check doesn't actually mean good news for white, because you're not actually checking the king. We learned about stalemate in our first video. So instead of moving one step closer with the queen, we simply bring the king forward all the way up to eventually support our queen in delivering a checkmate. We're going to quickly go through another example just like it to see it in action. The queen moves a knight's check away, and we move one square forward, a knight's check away. We continue to move a knight's check away until we get the king to the edge of the board, this time on the file. Once we've trapped the king on the furthest file, in this case the H file, we bring our king forward to ultimately help our queen deliver the checkmate and get the job done. Our last checkmate is yet even more
Okay, so that was really nice. Thank you, Danny, especially with the additional information that was not in the text. So that was quite all right. And yeah, we continue. And oh, I was just taking a look at the chat, and Pifflesticks was in. I missed him on YouTube, so thank you for chatting. Jurica is our chat master here, so he took care.
Yes.
Okay, right.
If anybody has anything to ask, just write me in chat. I will answer straight away. Yeah.
Alrighty. Nice. So, yeah, we're going to the next variation, and that is the Rook mate. So, hopefully you mastered the Queen mate, because now we are going to look at another crucial mating technique, the Rook mate. The technique we will show you for mating with the Rook versus Lone King shares some similarities to the Queen mate, namely that we will use a similar knight's check method to chase the king backwards. Just like the Queen mate, in order to checkmate with the Rook, you need to push the king to the edge of the board. The difference is this time, both the king and rook are needed to do so. Let's see how it works. We play Rook A4 check. And if I take a look at for myself, we have the white king preventing the black king to go to D3, E4, E3 and F3. The white king takes care of the fourth rank, so the black king needs to retreat to the fifth rank. And that's our goal, to chase it to the edge of the board. Let's see what Danny says in the written information. The first rule to remember is to only give checks to the king when both kings are opposed. They are opposed here. Well, that's the closest they are ever going to be together on the board, because there always needs to be one square in between two kings. Otherwise, somebody played an illegal move. It's not okay to put yourself into check. Okay, this means whenever there's a single square in between the two, horizontally or vertically, here the kings are opposed, so we give a check with the rook, effectively pushing the king backwards. And Jurica, just in case, opposed kings are also opposed if there is diagonally a square between them, right?
Yes. Okay. That's called king's opposition. Yeah, that's very important for endgames. I mean, and yeah, what you ask is actually diagonal opposition, which is also, there is also like long distance opposition, but this one is like basic, I would say, like main king's opposition. And yeah, it's we very often use this term, and it's very often analyzed in endgames. Yeah.
Alrighty, thank you. Okay, now we continue. The king needs to go to the fifth rank, and we are just chasing it with our king, it looks like. The rook now acts as a barrier forever cutting off the enemy king from ranks 1 to 4. This barrier will continue to gradually become smaller. The king is now needed to push the king back further. We always put the king a knight's distance away from the enemy king. This cleverly gives black the chance to put the kings in opposition, allowing us another rook check. This process is repeated until the enemy kings are directly opposed. So it's again a knight's distance away. So let's see. It's king g5 now, and again we will have the knight's distance, the L shape. Okay, and we should never give a rook check when the kings are not in opposition, such here with 3 a5 check, because then the king has escape squares, as I would call them, and he can go to either g4 or h4. Okay, doing so would make the checkmate slower and more difficult. Okay, so instead of rook a5 check, we play king, or here king f3. That's what was played. And now, not to be in opposition right away, black plays king h5, and we have the king g3, and now, just to stay on the 5th rank instead of directly going to the 6th, black is playing king g5. Here we have this opposition again. The black king had no other choice but to either oppose the kings or to move backwards voluntarily, making life easier for us. And now we do the same thing as we did before. We are giving check. Black cannot go to the 4th rank because we have our king here, and that's why the black rook needs to go to the 6th rank now. The kings are opposed, so we follow rule number 1 and give another check. King moves to f6, and now we are playing the knight's distance again with the king. Now it's time to once again use our king to force king opposition. Remember, move a knight's distance away. And this is so funny. I mean, I learned chess playing at the age of 6. I'm now way older, and I believe this is really the first time that I hear about this king's distance, or king's what was it called earlier, king's check, and that is funny to me. Really didn't know it, so it's worth doing this course for me too. Really nice. Okay, so next move is king e6. Now he tries to go the other way. Notice king g6 would only make our job easier by allowing another quick rook check, rook a6. So that's why he played king e6. Then we just follow this pattern, king f7, king d6. Again, the knight distance. He tries to run away. We are following with the knight's distance. Now he takes the rook, and similar to the ladder mate, where the king got too close to my rooks, we just bring the rook over to the h-file, and then we can do the same thing again. If the king ever attacks the rook, don't forget to move your rook to safety on the other side of the board. Blindly repeating the process with the careless 10 c4 would result in an immediate draw after 10 king takes a5, as only the kings on the board is immediately drawn, no way to checkmate. Okay, now we completed here. Rook g5, king b6. We follow with the king in the knight's distance. King a6, king b4, king b7. Okay, notice this time he went voluntarily up a rank. He could have played b6 and then we would have brought the rook up to g6, and then he had to was forced to move. But here he did so voluntarily. King c5, yeah, always a knight's check away. And king c7, and here we have the opposing kings again, which means it's time for the rook check. Rook check, the kings are opposed, we give a rook check. And now the final part, bringing the rook to the king, sorry, or forcing the king to the 8th rank. Okay, king c8, king d6, king b8, king c6, again, knight's distance, king a8, king b6. Now there's only one square left to go for the black king, which is b8. And here we have the opposing kings again, and last move, rook g8, checkmate. Nice. And finally we give checkmate on the edge of the board, because black's king has no more ranks to run backwards to. Notice the king's role in cutting off 3 key escape squares from the black king. 1, 2, 3. Practice this checkmate on chess.com until you can do it in your sleep. Your results will show. Okay, I still remember that I practiced this with my brother when I was young, and that was nice training, but we didn't do it with the knight's distance. Okay, so taking a look at the video.
Difficult than the king and queen checkmate. But lucky for us, there's a tip and a pattern of keeping a knight's check away that's going to make it easy for us to master. The first thing we do in checkmating with a king and a rook versus a lone black king is we look for every opportunity to force the king toward the edge of the board. The problem is you can only do so when the 2 kings are aligned. Why? As long as the kings are directly opposing each other, that means that your king controls every possible square that the black king could use to stay active. And when our kings are in direct opposition, if we give the check with the rook, the king will have to move backward, because there is no way to move the king forward without putting it in check. The black king gets 1 step closer to the 8th rank. Now, where does that knight's check come into play? Similar to what you saw, that if the queen just checked the king, you would not make progress. If your king just chases the black king, you won't make progress, because if you ever give check when the kings are not aligned, the black king will not move backward, it will stay active, and you haven't made any progress. In fact, you might have made your job harder. So rather than running at the enemy king, by moving our king directly in front, we move a knight's check away. By moving a knight's check away, we are allowing black to take opposition, and if he chooses to directly oppose our king, only then will we deliver the check that forces him backward. Let's see it in real time. If we play rook a4 check and the king runs the other direction, perhaps to f5, trying to stay away, we bring our king a knight's check forward. He runs and we chase, a knight's check forward. We continue to chase via a knight's check, only delivering a check with the rook once both kings are directly opposed. Opposition means we can check and push the king backward. We chase again, a knight's check away. Note one more time that it doesn't make sense to oppose the king because you can't make progress this way. Instead, you move a knight's check away, chase the king to the other side of the board, never miss a chance to safeguard your rook, as that would be a problem. And if you need to, you can even waste a move. With the move rook to g5, white actually puts the turn back on black. Now, if the king goes to d6, what would we play? A check to force the king back. So instead, the king runs, and we give chase, a knight's check away. Here, let's say the king voluntarily goes backward to try to trick us. Easy enough is to move the king forward, a knight's check away, to c5. If the king goes back in front, we can check once again, forcing him back to the furthest rank. If the king moves to c8, the fastest checkmate here would be to move the king a knight's check away to d6, forcing the king to run into the corner where he eventually runs out of squares and ultimately is checkmated on the back rank. Note how important it is that you don't give the check until the kings are directly opposed and the king has nowhere to go. If somehow the black king were on c8 and you gave this check, the black king could escape to d7. So we only give checks when the kings are directly lined up. There are different ways to checkmate with a king and rook. I've taught you the king and rook knights check away method in order to chase and only deliver the check when the kings are directly opposed. Watch this part of the video a few times to really make sure you master it, and maybe even give it a try practicing the position against the computer on chess.com. It's one that you're really going to want to memorize before you move on from. Now that we've learned the 3 basic checkmates,
Thank you, Danny. And yeah, it was interesting to see that there was more information given in the video, as there was an explanation about an intermediate move with the king, with the rook, sorry, to force the black king to move. So let's continue here. Next variation. So we're now at the rookmate practice. Black's move was 14, king c7. In this position, we are already pretty close to delivering checkmate. We know this because black's king is almost pushed back to the side of the board. Let's review how to finish it off. Your move is rook g7 because we have the opposed kings here. Remember, when it's our move and the kings are in a position, we give a check with the rook to push the king back even further. Yes, I think I got the hang of that. So white to play, opposed kings, check. Now it ran away, c8, and my move now is king d6. Remember, the king moves up a knight's distance away. So it is d6. And the chase begins. Yes. Knight's distance, knight's distance, and I play the knight's distance. Okay. And as you could see, the only possible move for black was king b6. They are in opposition, and I can give the final rook g8 checkmate. Danny recommends to drill this one until you know it like the back of your hand. Right? So white to play, checkmate. Here white to play, they're opposed, check. He runs away, and I go here, and oh, this would be wrong. I need to chase with the king on the knight's distance. Okay, again, knight's distance, and opposed kings, and checkmate. Again, opposed kings, check. Knight's distance, knight's distance, knight's distance, and checkmate. Good. Next variation. So I don't know if there was an additional video. I think it's not, because Danny told us to keep on learning until we know it, and like the back of our hands. Okay, so now we are done probably with this, and we go to the pawn promotion, king on the 6th. Now that you have mastered checkmating with a rook, and more importantly with a queen, it's time to learn how to promote a pawn. With this knowledge, you can win chess games by having earned only one single pawn for the endgame. White will be able to promote their pawn and win the game, no matter whose move it is in this position. This is always the case when the king is in front of his pawn on the 6th rank. However, it looks slightly different depending whose move it is. Let's say it's black's move. Here the pawn promotes very easily with little effort. Let's see how. Black's move was king d8. Black must choose to step aside. Why? Because cannot go to the 7th rank. All are protected by the white's king. Okay. Has to step aside, allowing our king to move up and create a red carpet for the pawn to promote. White's move is king f7, and now all squares that lead to the promotion square, e8 here, are protected by the knight. So whichever way the enemy king goes, we go the other way towards the back rank. Now our next 3 moves are pretty clear: push the pawn, push again, and promote. Because of our king's protection of each of the pawn squares, there's nothing black can do about it. White to play. Okay, protecting, pushing, 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 pushing. Okay. Black's move was king d7, and our move was 5, pawn to e8, promotion to queen. Check. Hooray! We've promoted our pawn to a powerful new queen, which we will now use to checkmate our opponent using the technique we saw previously. Let's imagine from the starting position. Black chose to go the other way with 1 king f8. The technique is the same, we simply move the king up the other way with the 2 king d7. And it's all she wrote after king f7, king pawn e6, pushing the pawn now, king f8, pushing the pawn, check. He tries his very last try, and finally, again, promotion, winning the game. Nice. Okay, so white to play. Yeah, I can promote giving check. And here I need to protect my 3 squares for the pawn. Then I need to push the pawn, run through to the promotion square, check again, and they are free to go. Free, check, 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 and promote. So that was all done. Very nice. So basically I understand the position I look for in an endgame would be if the black king is on the back rank, or in general on the board. I need to have an opposing king and the pawn directly behind it. Next variation. Oh no, Danny's video is missing. So before we start Danny's video, I'm still looking at chat just in case something happened. So that is all good, nice, and we can continue. Right. Play Danny's video.
Ladder, king and queen, and king and rook. It's time to deliver on the promise I made, which is that you're going to learn how to win chess games with just a single pawn advantage. If you take that in for a second, it's a pretty powerful statement. That means through all the opening and complex tactics and strategies, if you manage to earn just 1 pawn advantage and you master the technique I'm about to show you here, you can win chess games with the smallest of margins. In this example, we have a famous position known as king on the 6th, pawn on the 5th, reflecting their respective ranks. King on the 6th, pawn on the 5th is a winning king and pawn ending where no matter what black does, we are going to be able to bring a new queen to the board. The first example, with black to move, makes it look easy. The black king is in opposition, and he must choose where to go, either to f8 or d8. Either way gives white exactly what he wants. After the king moves, white can move the king to the square that black is no longer protecting. From f7, white actually controls every critical square for the white queen to enter the game. After the king moves, we check, and the pawn goes marching on to a position that I don't even need to show you because you've now mastered the king and queen checkmate. If the black king were to move to f8, we would take the d7 square, and once again, the pawn goes marching on. This position, in terms of opposition, where the black king has to give way, either to d7 or to f7, is a technique that works for every single one of the pawns besides the rook pawns. Rook pawns don't work because there's no file for the king to protect. But in this case, what if it was white to move? Lucky, the timing works out that even if black has opposition, as long as you have king on the 6th, pawn on the 5th, you...
Here we are already in the second part of the pawn promotion, and we are going to go again first with the text, and so we start. So, as advertised, even if it's white's move from this position, white is able to promote the pawn and win the game. Let's see what it looks like this time. Okay, we're taking a look. So, first move is king d6. The white king steps to one side of the pawn, allowing it to move forward. It doesn't matter which side white chooses, as we will see. White to play. I just repeat what I just saw, moving to the side. Black's move was king d8, following the opposition, and the black king attempts to maintain opposition by stepping in front of our king, but it's no use. Our move is bringing up the pawn to e6. It's time for the pawn to push up the board. Okay, white to play, pushing. King goes to e8. Our move is e7. All right. And now, as I see this, the pawn is protected, cannot be taken. This square, d7 square, is protected by white's king, and d8 is now under control of the white's pawn. So the king is forced to move to the other side, not to f8, because that is also under control of the white pawn. So he has to move to f7, and then I can bring up the king, so we have the e8 square protected, and then promote the pawn. Let's see if that all is correct. An important move. Now black cannot stay on e8 square forever as he would prefer, but he must move out of the way. White to play. Okay, king f7, as I predicted, he's going to go there. We are going here with the white king on d7. It is the king's duty to now escort the pawn to the promotion square. Don't promote too soon, or the new queen will simply be captured with a draw after, for example, e takes or e8 queen promotion, and then, as we forgot to bring up the king, our opponent just takes our newly made queen with king takes e8. White to play. Never forgot the king move here. Black goes to king f6, and our move here is e8 equals a queen. We have made our new queen once again and will soon be able to give checkmate, as we learned before. Right. So again, we already did the king move. We are able to promote the full sequence. So we go to the side with the king. We start pushing the pawn. Again, pushing the pawn. Now going up with the king to, get control of the e8 square. And now we are able to promote. Okay, and again, so we won't forget. The more often it goes into the short-term memory, the better that is. And here we have it. Okay, so we did all this, and before we go to the passed pawns, we again take a look at Danny's video for the pawn promotion king on the 6th, part 2.
You still win the game. White can shuffle to one side, and as black tries to stay in front, the pawn can march forward and ultimately squeeze the black king away from the square that he wishes he could sit on forever, and ultimately get the same position we had with the queen entering the game. Note that white could have also moved to f6 and achieved the same result, as eventually the white queen is destined to re-enter the fight and help white checkmate. Passed pawns almost always need the help of their king.
Thank you, Danny. That was really nice. And passed pawns. And why don't we start right away with the passed pawns? Okay, let's read. Passed pawns are pawns that don't have enemy pawns on adjacent files that can oppose it on its way to promotion. Did I understand that? Passed pawns are pawns that don't have enemy pawns on adjacent files that can oppose it on its way to promotion. Let's see. I think we have two passed pawns here. One is the white pawn on b5, because there is no black pawn that can take it, because there is no pawn on the c file, and the pawn on the a file already passed the white pawn and is not able to take it anymore. And we have another passed pawn. It is the h pawn by black, and there is no white pawn inside on adjacent files, so two passed pawns. Let's see if that was correct. Passed pawns are incredibly powerful assets in any endgame because they can more easily be promoted to a queen. What's even stronger than a passed pawn? A protected passed pawn. Just like it sounds, a protected passed pawn is supported by a friendly pawn on an adjacent file. So here we have the passed pawn, and it is a protected passed pawn because it is supported by a I call it fellow pawn on an adjacent file. Okay, so in this position the b pawn is a protected passed pawn, which will win white the game by eventually promoting to a queen. Let's see how. First move is king g5, rushing to take the pawn, the lonely pawn on h7, I guess. First, white will need to capture black's h-pawn to prevent black from making a queen. Luckily, due to the power of protected passed pawns, white has time for a king excursion. King c5, trying to get the pawn on a4, but if he takes the pawn on h4, the white pawn on b5 is free to go and cannot be reached by the black king anymore. Okay, so it was king c5, king h6, king b6. Yeah, he noticed that it cannot take the h4 pawn because then the b pawn is free to run. Black cannot get greedy with king b4 and try to capture white's a4 pawn. Because the king steps on a rank behind the passed pawn, it will take off and promote to queen. Yeah, see, no way to reach it anymore before promotion. Okay, so then after king b6, we are having king takes h7. The h-pawn has been eliminated, and now the king can waltz to the other side to help the b-pawn promote. How is that done? King c5, again the black king has to go back and forth. Our king comes in, back and forth. Black helplessly waits for the arrival of the white king. Coming closer, dancing around, coming closer, dancing back. Then going into opposition, and that is vertical opposition. Now let's take a look where the king has squares to go to. These three squares are all taken by the king and one by the pawn, so black cannot go here. Black cannot go to a6 because that is also, well, the pawn has an eye on it. That leaves us with two squares for the black king, a7 and b7. Let's see what happens. King to b7. Now we are playing king c5 because I think this will give protection by the king for b6, and we can go with the pawn to b6. Then we can just go with the king b5 and take the pawn on a5. Let's see if that was correct. We had king c5, then king c7. Now, yes, pawn goes to b6, giving a check. Finally, with the king's support, the passed pawns become mobile and white will be victorious. King to b6, again dancing. Now the king comes in for the final blow. King b8, king takes, and it is an easy win from here with two connected pawns rolling up the board, helping each other become queens. Nice. Righty. So let's see what Danny says.
In order to become a queen. But there are some advantages that are so powerful, your king can basically take a stroll in the park before ultimately helping the queen to re-enter the game. The first most powerful pass pawn you could achieve is what we call a protected pass pawn. This pawn is protected by another pawn. And what this shows is that the black king is forever frozen to guarding this queen from entering on b8. Depending on what white does, black quickly realizes his frustration. He would love to play king to b4 in order to attack this pawn, but the moment he gives up his protection, the pawn pushes and there is no turning back. If the king doesn't give up his protection of the b6 square, then the white king is free to do whatever he wants, including what he just did, to capture that pawn on the edge of the board, and eventually come all the way around and help our pawn advance and eventually win the game easily. Protected passers really highlight an advantage that is both strategic in nature and ultimately tactical. It's strategic because it's long-term. Black can do nothing to get rid of the protector of the passed pawn. But it's tactical because ultimately this pawn will become a queen, and that power will help white checkmate. Protected passed pawns, whether they occur on the B file or any other file, are incredibly powerful, and you should look to achieve them as you enter any endgame. The next type of passed...
Thank you, Danny, as always. So we are going to the next variation here, and that is outside passed pawns. So the next type of passed pawn to learn about is the outside passed pawn. An outside passed pawn is typically on an H or an A, typically an A or an H pawn, and can be far removed from the other action that is taking place on the board. These are incredible assets in an endgame, as they act as an effective decoy for the enemy king, whose job it is to prevent it from promoting. Meanwhile, the side with the passed pawn can rush their king to the other side of the board, where it can target enemy pawns. Let's see how play can proceed. A5, trying to rush to the promotion square. White begins by pushing the pawn forward, declaring, "Hey, I'm going to promote if you don't come and stop me." King c6. Okay, black really needs to stop it. Black is obliged to chase the outside passed pawn with the king to prevent it from promoting. King e5. I'm going to sneak over to the black pawns because they cannot be protected by the king, who has another job to do. The white king uses the time to sneak the king into black's camp with the intention of winning all the pawns. Let's see how that plays out. King b5, king d6, king takes, king e4, and now they are more or less helpless. King activity is vital in the endgame, and here black is totally lost because their king sits clear across the board while all the pawns are taken. King b4. Black would meet the same fate after trying to run away with the pawns to avoid immediate capture. In the end, they will fall. Here is a simple variation. So, instead of king b4, it is f5, trying to run away, king f7, g5, king f6, and g4, king f5, and the remaining black pawns will fall. We continue. Without them running away, it is king takes f7, king c4, king takes g7, king d4, king takes h7, king e4, and 8h4. White chooses the h-pawn as their new queen, and black is not able to prevent it from promoting. King f4, h5, king g5, h6. After just a couple more moves, the pawn will become a queen and black will be mated. Congratulations, you've completed your daily goal 1 hour. Keep a great job, keep it up. For the new viewers of the stream here, of our Chessable Course Reviews and learning sessions, I set Chessable so that it gives me a nice congratulations if I completed my daily goal. My daily goal on Chessable is 1 hour, and well, you can see I'm being motivated by fireworks and a nice text telling me that I did it. Okay, we continue. After just a couple or more moves, the pawn will become a queen and black will be mated. We already did that. Okay, so next I thought there were example variations given to me to solve, but here it directly dumped. So we are taking a look at the video, and let's go directly to the video. Play.
Pawn advantage to talk about in the endgame is the outside passer. An outside pass pawn is a pawn that is the furthest away from what's going on the other side of the board. In this case, the A pawn is going to be used to distract the black king so that ultimately white can win not just the black pawns, but the game by getting a new queen on the king side of the board. White can start with A5, and as the king is distracted, white enters to the king side. This king wishes he was much closer, but it's too late for him to get back and to have any sort of defensive chances against white from gobbling all the pawns and ultimately winning and getting a queen with at least one of them. Outside pass pawns may not be as permanent as protected pass pawns, but they're often the difference in an otherwise very equal game like this one. An outside pass pawn can distract the enemy, and as seen, no matter what happens, including trying to rush the pawns forward, black is too slow, and ultimately white catches up by winning the pawns. Learning to...
Okay, so we already covered 57% of the endgame chapter, and regardless what happens, we will finish the full course tonight. It is the endgame and then putting it all together. So continue. Outside passed pawns number 2. Outside passed pawns can and should be sacrificed if doing so puts your king in a better resulting position than your opponent's king. Here is an example. Okay, let's first take a look what we have on the board. No passed pawns, no passed pawns, no passed pawns. Here we have a passed pawn because it cannot be taken by an enemy pawn on the adjacent files. No passed pawns, no passed pawns. So e4 is the only passed pawn on the board, just for my training. Okay, so here's an example. White plays g4 check. A brilliant move with the first glance appears, which at first glance appears to give up 2 pawns for 1, but the idea soon becomes clear. Black takes, white takes, and black takes with the king. And now we can take the very prior valuable passed pawn. King e4, and look how the black king is away from the action. The action takes place on the queen side here, and yeah, black is just too slow, will not be there in time. By distracting the black king with the outside passed g-pawn, we were able to win black's central pawn and position ourselves to capture black's remaining army first. Let's see. King g3, king d5 going where the action is, king f3 also going where the action is but too slow, king c5, king e3, take, trying to take again, also taking but being too late, c4. Now we have a passer, like a real passer, and it cannot be reached by black's king, so we are able to promote sooner and later and win the game. Black was able to win one measly pawn, but allows another of our pawns to run forward in the process. The c-pawn will promote, and in this position our extra a-pawn isn't even needed. Okay. So will I be given practice here? No, I don't again. So we watch the video right away.
Recognize and use an outside pass pawn is critical. This position here occurs after a very famous tactic, and it's white to play and win. White would love to find a way to win these pawns and ultimately the game. But right now, it actually seems like black is in charge. He has the more active king, and actually black has a pass pawn in the center of the board. If it wasn't for this white king, black would already be advancing this pawn to get a new queen. However, what we see is that even more important than king activity, which I already foreshadowed as one of the key defining factors of a good endgame position, an outside pass pawn can chase the enemy king where it doesn't matter how active he is if he's not in the right area of the board. Here white has the brilliant move g4, sacrificing the g-pawn 2 for 1. But the moment black captures, white takes, and this king is much further away from the real action that matters over here. Black tries to shuffle and keep pace, but ultimately we see the king that is too far away is way too slow from white, bringing a new queen to the board. White didn't even need the second pawn and could have already been advancing this pawn to get a new queen. This tactic is the one that got us to that position. White actually took on f6.
Okay, so let's change to our written text again, and we'll see what Danny says about it in the video later. Start. Okay, outside passed pawns, how we got there. Just for fun, let's take a look how we reached the endgame from the previous example. So often in chess, tactics lead to transformations of the position that turn into endgames that are winning for one side. In this game, white saw a little deeper. So from here, rook takes f6 was played. White temporarily sacrifices the rook for the knight. We know that rooks are more valuable than knights, 5 for rook, 3 for a knight, but white had a plan. Rook takes c3. Black returns the favor with a counter-sacrifice. Had black taken the bait with one king takes f6, here, white's intention was knight e4 check, with a double attack, as the rook is also being attacked, with a double attack of fork on the king and rook, ultimately winning a piece after the further to king f5. Knight takes the rook on c5. Black saw white's clever trap and prevented it by simply capturing the knight. So, after rook takes c3 was played, white came up with rook takes f7 check. Crucially, white is able to win a pawn in this transaction by throwing in a check with the rook and capturing black's f-pawn. This tactic is called Desperado. I have never in my life heard a tactic called Desperado. It's new to me, so I better understand what's happening here. I read again. Crucially, white is able to win a pawn in this transaction by throwing in a check with the rook and capturing black's f-pawn. It's called Desperado. Why is it called Desperado? Because it needs a name. Okay, and it's probably a tactic because
probably it comes from the word desperation. It's like a desperate move.
Jurica, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I believe so too. Now you're saying it. Okay. So, its king takes f7. Yeah, the desperate rook is now gone. And here b takes c3. And this all had been calculated by white. Yeah, and it's really nice. The series of exchanges has resulted in a king and pawn endgame. Let's analyze what has happened. As we saw, all of the pieces have been exchanged and white has won a pawn in the process. Not only that, but now white's g and h pawns against black's lone h pawn will work together to make an outside passed pawn. When a player has more pawns on one side of the board than their opponent has on the same side, we call that a pawn majority. Pawn majorities usually have the potential to create a passed pawn. It is white's kingside majority, 1-2 versus 1, that, as we saw in the previous example, ultimately helped white win the game. Play through the rest of the moves to see how the game continued from here. We do so. King f6, king f2. Kings first, I believe, is a rule here. King f5, king f3, bringing them to the action. h5, g3, e5, h3, e4. And this is already known. It's not yet the position because the white king is in check here. King e3. And now king b5. And now we reach the position that we saw earlier on. And now, no, not yet. Yeah, there was what was the position in the earlier thing? Yeah, let's take a look. That was the position. Okay, 1, 2, a3. All right. Going here again, all the way down, and we were here, a3, then a5, 10 g4. And I have to say something, because usually in these kind of endgames, I'm totally lost. I mean, not totally lost, but usually it somehow is terror for my brain, because it seems that there is so much to calculate, so many possibilities and so on. So I'm really interested to learn this from scratch here too. And in this position, maybe this goes too far also if I take a look at the clock. But my question here would be, if I have this, instead of playing a3, what happens if I go g4 right away? Then I believe that the protected pawn prevents me from taking both in time before the black king can reach the c5 pawns. I believe that is correct. Okay, so a3, a5, and now we are in the position we had before, and which we saw and analyzed and know why this is taking place now. Okay. Yep. Black's king is too late, and now we have the rushing pawn to promote on the c8 square. As we saw before, the c-pawn runs to the promised land and becomes a queen. Black can resign. And now comes my curiosity. I took a look at this one here and I was wondering why I cannot play g4 right away. So Chessable has another great feature, and it is called the Analysis board, where you can click on, another page comes up.
Well, you can
another
play
tab.
g4. Yeah.
Okay.
Also.
Yeah. Okay.
Basically.
Well,
Yeah.
well, you
it's pretty
know
much
it.
the
You
same.
know it right away. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
But we will still keep a look at it, so we
Yeah.
can see the Chessable feature. And yeah, now we have a computer analyzing all this and calculating it. Score is 1.75, so white should win. And here, if I'm too lazy to do all the calculations by myself, I can just do the move I think is correct, like playing g4 here right now. And the evaluation, the score will tell me if I'm right or wrong. So I play g4, and it's now 1.69, and I know that it will still work. Okay. So we go back to the I have to this is interesting. Okay, so I need to go to Opera. I present this from the Opera browser, and I'm in full screen mode, and I cannot go back to the other tab, I think. At least I don't know the shortcut with the keys for switching another tab in Opera. If there's somebody in the chat, please write it in. Who knows it? But I need to go to not the maximized full screen window. Then I can close the tab that I don't need, and I can go to the full screen mode again, and we can continue with the course. Okay. Thank you, Jurica, of course, always appreciate it.
No problem.
So we go to Danny, and let's see what he was saying about
inviting
this.
the potential of a fork on e4. But in this game, black saw the idea and captured on c3, trading an eye for an eye. White, however, recognized the potential for the 2-on-1 outside pass pawn majority, which is why I backed up to show it. White captures on f7 with check before recapturing on c3. And before you can have an outside passer, you often need a majority. In this position, white has 2 pawns versus 1. 2 pawns will eventually become 1 versus none. And that's exactly what happens in this game and in the position that we already saw play out, as white eventually advanced, sacrificed the g-pawn in order to force the black king away, and then ultimately win the game on the other side of the board. You just learned your first endgame tactic and saw advanced endgame strategy by keeping an eye on a pawn majority, what eventually becomes an outside pass pawn, what eventually becomes a winning endgame position. Knowing your basic checkmates is key. You have to be able to win with just a few pieces on the board. Knowing how critical a single pawn advantage can be, whether it's just a regular pass pawn or an outside pass pawn, or one that hasn't even become one yet in that 2-on-1 brilliant tactical majority I showed you. But pass pawns are not the only big endgame advantage to shoot for. An active king can take an otherwise equal endgame into a winning one, just like this.
Okay, we take a look after we went through the written text, of course. So we are now through 64% of the endgame course or chapter here, and let's finish this. We are going right to the active king, and yeah, in the last example we learned about pawn majorities and using them to create passed pawns. This theme will be relevant in this example as well. However, this time let's focus on the element of king activity. In the endgame, since there are fewer pieces on the board, the king is generally less in danger of checkmate, and therefore can participate in the game as an active piece. Let's analyze this position, starting by comparing king activity. Okay, let me take a look first before I continue reading. Okay. Here it seems the black king is more active. But is it? Here we have the white rook taking the 8th rank. We have 1, 2 pieces, 2 squares free, 3 free. Okay, here we have this one is taken, the 4th rank by black. And so, well, I can't really decide. Let's see what it says. Black's king is stuck playing a defensive role. We have an isolated pawn. And here we have a, what was it called? Connected pawns. It's not passed, but it's connected pawns. Okay. So, Black's king is stuck playing a defensive role. It can never move up past the 7th rank after moves such as 1 king c3, king b6. For example, because this would allow rook b8 check with a check on the king. And this would allow rook b8 check with a check on the king. That's funny. Okay. After this king moves, white can promote their outside passed h-pawn. King c6, h8, queen. And after 3, rook takes h8 and rook takes h8. White emerges up a rook, which is enough to win the game. Nice. With the understanding that Black's king is tied down, White should figure out a way to activate their own king. Okay. We would love to move the king all the way around towards the g7 square in order to help the h-pawn promote. However, Black's rook is creating a barrier against this idea. What should White do? a4. Oh, this looks interesting. An amazing move. With this pawn push, White activates their queenside pawn majority and creates a new route for the king up the board, safe from the Black's rook's gaze. B takes a4, check. This pawn must be taken or else White will take it. King takes a4. Now the white king shuffles up the board using his own b-pawn as a shield, and we are one step closer to our goal of bringing the king all the way to g7. King a7, king b5, king b7, king c5, he's on his way, king c7. The black king creates opposition, which they hope will deter white's king's march, but in comes the b-pawn. b5. The passed b-pawn is an excellent decoy against the black king, which will allow the white king to continue his journey to g7. It's needed for black's king is needed for what's the word in English for it? To, well, basically just stop the pawn from promoting. Okay. So the passed b-pawn is an excellent decoy against the black king, which will allow the white king to continue journey to g7. Let's see the journey. Needs to go back to protect it or to stop it from promoting. King d6. Now the way is free. King a7. King e7. King b7. King f6. And now next is probably g7. So here king takes f6 is of course okay as well. Yeah, makes sense. King a7 and king g7. We made it. Now that the king has taken over defensive duties of the h-pawn, the white rook can move out of the way for it to be promoted. King b7, rook f8, moving out of the way. Here white resigned, as the creation of a new queen is inevitable. But let's play it out for completeness sake. So I believe we have a typo here. Why should white resign? It's black who resigned, I guess. So, but let's play it out for completeness sake. King b6, we promote to the queen, rook takes h8, and rook takes h8. Yes, it's a typo here. Black has had to sacrifice their rook, leaving us up a rook in a winning position. Remember, in endgames, king activity can often decide the result of the game in favor of whoever king is more active. Okay, so remember, in endgames, kings become active pieces and they need to go to where the action is. Let's take a look at Danny's explanations.
Famous game I'm about to show you here. In this position, white has a passed pawn. White would love to queen that pawn and end the game. But moving the rook to a square to prepare to queen would simply allow black to take it. Unless we could move that rook with some sort of distraction, we don't really have any chance of queening this pawn. Further, the black bishop actually dominates the white knight currently where it stands. So it's not clear that our knight has any ability to get in here and help our goal of becoming a queen. But as we look to the other side of the board, our king is already slightly more active than the black counterpart. Further, we now realize that if the black king were ever to move, say after a4, the black king moves forward, that would give us the tempo we need in order to move the rook with check and ultimately get a queen on the next move, winning the game. The knowledge of the black king being stuck is huge for white. White now has a plan in mind. If white can find some way to get its king more active and into this game, white should be able to win because the black king is stuck out of fear of allowing the white rook to move with check. The problem for white is how to bring the king forward. As much as we would like to enter via the arrows I drew, the black rook is actually perfect in its current position, cutting off the white king from entering and holding on.
I pause a little because I always explained that the black king was dancing around A, B, C files because he needed to stop the pawn from promotion. But it was that he was giving check the white rook and then making way for the promotion. That's why I guess. Okay, let's continue.
Onto the H pawn. It turns out that move I played a4 was not just an accident. By threatening to capture this pawn, we force black's hand. Black has to capture on a4, allowing the white king new space that it otherwise would not have. The rook still controls the fourth rank, but the white king is shielded by the pawn, allowing it to enter to the fifth rank on the next move. Note again that black has no ability to stop this, as bringing the king forward to either square would allow a check, followed by a queen to enter, and white is winning because if black takes the queen, white can take back, and the game is over with white up a rook. Because of that, we see true king dominance here for white. The black king stays put, and the white king enters. The black king tries to shield, but the white king stays active, headed toward our ultimate goal of helping realize a new lady on h8. Black can try to stop the king from entering, but here comes a passed pawn to help. If the black king stays over here, we might have a new queen on b8. So black chooses his poison to stay on the b file, ultimately allowing white to dominate in terms of pure king activity all the way to a square that allows white to move the rook. Now under the newfound protection of the king on g7, white will get a queen on h8 in the next move, and black simply resigned. King activity in examples like this can be the difference in a drawn endgame, meaning an equal game, versus a winning endgame if you know how to use your king. Congratulations, you just learned more about the endgame than 99% of chess players ever will. Having only a few pieces left may not sound like a lot of fun, but if you know how to use them to checkmate, it can be. Having just a single pawn advantage may not seem like an exciting game, but if you know how to get a queen, whether by opposition or an outside pass pawn majority, winning, after all, is still winning. And if you can look at the king for the true power that he has inside of him, activating it to win endgames, you may not think that endgames are so hard after all. Hope you enjoyed this video. Go play some games on chess.com and get the win in the endgame. We'll see you around as you play and win your endgames today.
All right. So we are not going to play some endgames on chess.com as we still have 3 reviews to do here. I continue, and we have the review number 1 here. White has an extra queen in this endgame and is looking for checkmate. What is the quickest way to do it? Okay. So I believe if I would do the knight check move by putting the queen to c7, it is stalemate because the black king has nowhere to go without putting him into check. So I need to bring in the king. Again the king, and well, that was one move too slow. I already can deliver checkmate by a support checkmate, and it is queen to b7. My fault, I'm sorry. Okay, so that was okay. Let's read what happened. King c6, nice job avoiding stalemate. The king steps closer, and next we will deliver checkmate with the queen. When the enemy king is in the corner, it's crucial not to bring your queen one square closer to with one c7, which would end the game in a draw or stalemate. Black has no legal moves in the position, but it's not in check. King b8, that's what black played, the only possible move. And here we have the checkmate. This is a clear example of helpmate as the king gets to defend the queen giving mate. So here I did one additional move which wouldn't have stopped me from mating black, but in a blitz game with having only 0.3 seconds left, it would have just cost me the win and ending in a draw. So I need to pay more attention as always. Review number 2. Let's see if you remember how to promote a pawn with your king on the 6th rank. Remember, white is winning and will be able to promote this pawn if this position is reached, regardless of whose move it is. This time, black has the opposition and it's white's move. Both king b6 and king d6 work, but let's step to the right to get started. Okay, so white to play. Here I now play the... Okay, do I need to play something? Yes, we did this. But it's white's move. Blows work, but let's step to the right to get started. Okay, am I stuck? I wanted to move, but being here I cannot move. So what I usually do in these cases is I go to the review before, then go to the review here, and now I should be able to move. Yes, okay. So that's done, and now I can bring up the pawn, again the pawn, and protecting the promotion square with the king, promotion, and should be winning. That was correct. And last and final review for the endgame chapter is: here's an instructive endgame where both sides have the potential to make outside passed pawns. White on the queen side and black on the king side. Should white push ahead with their queen side majority, or are there more important considerations? So I read again. Both have the potential to make outside passed pawns. White on the queen side and black on the king side. Should white push ahead with their queen side majority? Queen side majority 1, 2, 1. And are there more important considerations? My first intuitive move would be pawn g5, to stop the majority on the king side of here. And otherwise I would be forced to run over with the king. So I might need to stop this. And here I can play pawn b4. And then creating the outside passed pawn. So what happens if I play this first? So it's b4. This would be h4 then. So here this counting starts, I think. So it's b4, h5. It is a5. And I can run through. It is h4. Now I can run through. Take, 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 take. So we have two queens here. And an equal game, I guess. So if I stop the pawn from going to h6 or h5, then I'm good on the queen side as I have the majority. So this is my plan. I hope this was kind of understandable what I thought, and my decision here is I go g5 to stop the majority from black on this side. So I'm always so curious, I'm shaking to move and see if it's wrong or right. Phew, it was correct. Okay, so how to follow up now? Now I will start the majority on the queen side, also correct. And now I can just push through and promote and will win. Ta-da! And now run. Yes, hard work pays off. You finished learning the chapter. I'm so happy if I make these things correct. And as this is a beginner's course, it would be so embarrassing if I wouldn't know this. But that's just chess and it's a learning journey. So never be embarrassed to learn something. It's always good. Great. We finished that chapter and are now able to go in the last chapter of this course, which is called Bringing It All Together. First, I take a quick look here. So that is all nice. Just looking at the chat and continuing with the course. Let's see. And I'm excited because I really don't know what to expect now. I've never seen the course before. I opened it when we started recording part number 1, and basically everything is new to me and I really have to think here. All right. Exit this chapter and we are going to the last one. How do I go there? Let me check. And see, here you are next due to spaced repetition in 2 hours and 27 minutes because I did that mistake earlier on. So here we are still in the end game and we can go to the next chapter here and there we have the learn part. Okay, so let's go. It's called Bring It All Together. And oh, this is going to be fun. The Immortal Blitz game, Wesley versus Garry Kasparov, St. Louis 2022. Okay, congratulations. By getting this far in the course, you've learned a heck of a lot about chess. What did we learn? The rules of the game and the language of chess. How to play good opening moves. How to navigate the middle game with some basic strategic concepts. How to win your opponent's pieces through tactics. How to checkmate your opponent in the middle game and endgame, and much more. But for now, they're individual concepts compartmentalized. I believe, the first time I hear this English word, in your brain. Now it's time to see a full game of chess from start to finish and see the principles in action in all their glory. This game is by Wesley, a top American Grandmaster who managed to slay the one and only Garry Kasparov, former world champion and one of the greatest players of all time. Wesley had the white pieces while Kasparov had the black pieces. We will analyze this game from Wesley's point of view. So let's see. NF3. The first moves we've seen in the course were the pawn moves, e4 and d4, d4 and e4 and d4. Yeah. However, this move is equally good. It follows opening principles by developing a piece, controlling the center, here and there, and bringing the king one move closer to castling kingside. Sometimes strong players prefer this move to remain flexible with which central pawn to move. I might learn something here because that's also my first move with white. Black answered by g6 and we came up with e4. And this is something that I don't play, so I just keep looking but don't compare to my own opening. Now the position has transposed right back into a king's pawn game, almost as if pawn to e4 had been played on move 1, which means we could have also played e4 first, then g6 and then the knight. Okay, so it continued bishop g7 and d4. Black has done nothing to prevent white from taking control of the center with both central pawns. So Wesley obliges. Black will then aim to attack the center from a distance. d6, c4. Looks interesting. Wesley shoves yet another central pawn forward, taking further control of the important d5 square. Bishop g4 now. Black is putting pressure on white's center by undermining the f3 knight, by the f3 knight's control of d4. Okay. And pinning, of course. Notice this move puts the f3 knight in a relative pin as the queen sits behind it on d1. I really like it when I learn something and then I can remember stuff and see it in action as it's done here. So again, Danny, great job. So what has been played? Bishop e2. Wesley reacted by unpinning the knight, re-exerting its control of the center and developing a piece. Therefore, this is another great multi-purpose move in the opening, as it's always making space for the castling. Okay, knight c6, knight from b to d2. It's always important if you later write down your own moves. Yeah, the d2 square could have also been taken or going to with the knight on f3. And so not to mix it up, if you're reading your notation later, you have to write which knight went to d2. So it's knight b to d2. This move indirectly controls the d4 pawn. Why? Because if black ever captures the f3 knight, Wesley will recapture with the other one, replacing the defender of d4. Makes sense. You might wonder, why can't black simply capture the d4 pawn? Either with the knight or with the bishop. So let's see. After knight takes d4, white can simply take the piece with knight d4. And the problem for black is they have just given up a piece And suddenly the g4 bishop, this one here, is under attack. The bishop could take and is protected by the queen. So after bishop takes e2, knight takes e2, so it cannot be taken. White saves his knight and emerges up a piece. White has successfully arranged his pieces to defend his big center and has a great position to start the game. So here I have to tell the beginner guys from us something. So if you just like 4 days ago watched part 1 and then said, well, okay, I understood everything, and then went to part 2 and part 3, it's so much stuff that you really have to take in first and play your own games and see what mistakes are you doing, and yeah, just get the experience. Because if you sit here and say, how shall I know all this and how should I see all this? And yeah, it's just a matter of experience and getting the games in and finding out what works, what doesn't work, what happens if I don't calculate one more move, and so on. So it all comes by experience. Don't be disappointed if you're saying, well, this is way over my head, and it will come over time by learning more, by playing more. So please stay motivated. But this is very interesting, basically, to go through the game and analyze it, and that's the way we learn also. So yeah, we are here. White has successfully arranged his pieces to defend his big center and has a great position to start the game. We continue. e5, as this was all just played in the players' heads during calculation why they shouldn't do it. Okay, so e5, Kasparov finally takes his fair share of the center. d5, but it allows Wesley to push forward with the central d-pawn, gaining space in the center, which is generally a good thing because it creates more room on your side of the board for your pieces to maneuver. Then we have 7. Again, both knights could go to e7, so we need to write it down. Knight c, here this one, goes to e7, which is followed by h3. Wesley asks his opponent light squared bishop, "What are you doing in my territory?" The bishop will now need to make a decision. Retreat, go back, or trade on f3. What happened? He retreated. Now, let's take a look what would have happened if you had played bishop f3. So basically, in this course, calculation is not covered. Yeah, what's happening here is it shows you what the players were thinking and why they decided for this move or that move. Yeah, so that is something that will go on currently, or not currently, which will go on continuously in your heads once playing a chess game. Okay. Bishop takes f3. Yeah, it's not being played, but it was calculated in the head. So bishop takes f3, we retake with the knight. Was arguably stronger for black because with less space, his position is quite clogged and uncomfortable. Exchanging pieces and not losing time retreating was probably the better option. Okay, so what's being said here is that basically Kasparov did a slight mistake by retreating instead of taking. Okay, we go back to the position and white played c5. Black has broken the opening rule of not moving the same piece twice in the opening. Since Wesley has followed all the rules, he now has a great position and aims to exploit it with this timely pawn advance. Okay, so the breaking of the opening rule was the bishop going to g4 and then retreating. It was moved twice. Okay, so you might think this move simply loses a pawn and doesn't contribute to white's development. It's not defended. It could be taken by the pawn. But you'd be wrong. It provides the wonderful c4 square for white's d2 knight. c4 square, that's where the white's d2 knight could go, which ultimately needs to move in order to develop the rest of the queen side. The bishop here is kind of stuck and needs space. Crazy how a pawn move can have such important consequences for the rest of the pieces. So d now really takes the c5 pawn. Seeing nothing better, Kasparov took the free pawn on c5. Okay. So knight c4, as explained earlier on. Wesley immediately occupies the newly created c4 square with a knight, bringing it to a more active post where it immediately attacks black's e5 pawn. And notice that the white bishop is now freed on the diagonal c1 to h6. f6 was played. And as a sad way to defend, since now black's dark squared bishop stares at a brick wall of its own pawns. I just wonder for myself, but I could, well, get rid of the bad bishop, and it's always good to exchange a bad piece versus a good piece. So if I go to h6, yeah, then, well, I'm free on the diagonal, and if I'm taken with the bishop, I could retake with the knight, but this is just, it's kind of late and I don't really like to think, I'm sorry. So this is just my initial thought here. Okay. So, yeah. Wesley played d6, and Wesley notices if he had a knight on d6, he could give check to the black king. If he had a knight on d6, yeah, that would be given check. Okay, so give check to the black king and deny his opponent castling rights. Because if the king is in check, he cannot castle. Usually, if your king is unable to castle this early in the middle game, you're in bad shape, as your king will be exposed to attack for the rest of the game. This explains this pawn advance and why black should not capture the pawn with 11 c takes d6, knight take d6, and now king f8, denying the castling rights. But it's also not pleasant having an enemy pawn this far in your camp. Look at this, far in black's camp. Okay, so knight c8, bishop c3, attacking the pawn. A natural move, simply attacking the c5 pawn and developing a piece. b6, defending, black defense, and short castling by white. Let's pause and take stock of the position. Wesley has a huge advantage for the following reasons. White has more pieces in the game. Black has most of their pieces still on the back row, 1, 2, contributing nothing to the fight. White is castled and black's king is still stuck in the center where fireworks are about to take place. Remember the top 10 opening rules from Danny. If you don't know them, go and take a look at part 2 of our series here. 3. White's d-pawn has made its way all the way to the 6th rank and is essentially an extra attacker. Nice. So, how did the game continue? Bishop c6. And now we can take with the pawn. White was threatening to take the d-pawn, so it's time to trade on c7. Queen takes c7. And again, what would have happened if the queen would have taken d1? Rook would have gotten the queen, and it hands white control of the open d file. An important strategic asset, and leaves the c7 pawn alive. And only one square from queening. This would not do for black. I think that's pretty obvious here. Yeah, doesn't look good for black. So the better choice in this case was really taking on c7. Okay, so next move was a good move, and it was b4. When you have an active piece and a better position, it's important to take use of them quickly by creating even more options for them. Sometimes by sacrificing material. This pawn advance does just that by opening the c-file, so Wesley's next attacker, the a1 rook, can make its debut into the game. Okay, here we see the arrows. C takes b4. Rook now gets on the open d file. Rooks love open files because they have a lot of scope to move and attack along them. The c file is this rook's playground. Since the black queen sits on the same file, it could be in danger of attack by the rook. We learned discovered attack, and there might be a chance for that if the bishop moves away. Okay, so what happened here? Knight g to e7. Kasparov is in a hurry to castle and finally finish developing, but it's too late. What happens? Queen b3. If you remember the lesson about discoveries, you might notice that this move effectively prevents black from castling. This is because after he castles, take a look at the queen. It would give check if the pawn is not, if the knight is not in the way. White has the discovered attack of knight c takes e5. Knight c, this one, takes e5, check. I move here. Okay. So what is happening? I got an extra pawn for white because I was taking. Yeah. And if now the king moves away, I just trying to see why it was so nice. If the king,
I think knight b6 is just better. I think he mentions knight b6.
It comes to the next, right? Mm-hmm.
I think it's just stronger. Okay, this is also like knight c6 takes back, but maybe now knight c6 and bishop b5. But I think knight b6 is like better. Just
okay. Honestly. Then let's see right away why it was better.
More material, just more material. Rook.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking before you mentioned it. I was like, is this really good move, and how can he exploit the situation? I was thinking like the king or the is there a way to stop the check? And the first move that comes into mind is this is lots of tactics. So if I stop the check by moving with the bishop to d5, then we have the discovered attack again. The rook could take the queen, but then the bishop would take the queen, and
you can take the bishop with the pawn.
With the pawn. That's good then. Yeah, but still it's not as good as taking the rook right away, I believe. So it's knight takes b6, check from the queen, and an attack on the rook. So king goes to h8 in this case. Knight takes a8, wins the rook for a knight, and is also very strong, unleashing a discovered check on the black king. After it moves, white will win a lot of material. For example, after 18 here, we have king h8 again, and knight takes c6, knight takes c6, bishop b5 attacking the pinned piece on c6 when there's no way to save it. Okay, the queen needs to go away, I guess. Okay, and for me, as I said, I have 1750 rating in classical chess. This is a difficult position where I really have to calculate a lot, and it's easy to make mistakes. So if you're really a beginner, just learned the game this week, don't despair if it's over your head and you're saying, well, I read it, I understand it, but I would have never had the chance to find all that by myself. It's all good. It's totally normal for a beginner, and just keep on playing, keep on learning, and you will eventually make it in the future. Okay, so we go ahead and go back to the position. It was queen b3, and it was answered by h6. Okay, rook f d1, also taking an open file. Wesley, wisely. I love it. I love those kind of word games. I don't know if it's an English word game, but to me as a native German speaker, it's very funny to read. Wesley wisely developed his last inactive piece into the attack. And I just wonder how often Wesley needed to hear this in his past, and will probably just roll his eyes and say, yeah, funny. But as he probably is not watching our video, I highly doubt it, I can make fun as much as I want here. Okay, so the rook on d1 now enjoys the open d file, as I said, and Wesley is ready for the final assault. Okay, it's b5, attacking the knight. Knight takes e5 again. We saw that idea before. Because all of white's pieces are actively placed and black's king is vulnerable in the center, it's time for tactics. This stunning move busts through black's defenses towards the black king. In addition, moving the knight away reveals an attack on the b5 pawn from the bishop. By the light squared bishop, as it said here. These serious weaknesses are enough to warrant white sacrificing a piece. Continue. F takes our piece, and now bishop takes b5. What happens? The bishop now attacks black's light squared bishop, which is pinned to the queen. For now it's sufficiently defended, but not for long. So, rook b8, attacking the bishop. Kasparov desperately attacks one of Wesley's key attacking pieces. Bishop a4, just moving out of the way, being defended by the queen. A calm and sadistic move. Simply moving the bishop out of harm's way and saying, now all of my pieces are in aggressive positions and yours are weak and passive. I would like to add, na 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 na. What are you going to do now? Let's take stock of the position once more to appreciate the white's dominance. All of white's pieces have abundant potential and aggressive attacking posts. Notice your pieces don't need to necessarily be sitting on squares on your opponent's side of the board in order to attack. Black's pieces are all under attack or passive. The c6 bishop is under heavy fire, and so is the queen sitting behind it. The e7 knight passively defends the c6 bishop. The other knight does nothing. The g7 bishop stares at its own pawn on e5, and neither rook is participating in the game. Black's king is still stuck in the center, which is a huge part of Black's troubles, since it means it's vulnerable to checkmate attacks, and the h8 rook is not in the game, even still on his original position. So continue. Queen b7. Kasparov thought it wise to step out of the pin down the c file and hopes to trade the light squared bishop, but again it's too late. Rook takes c6. Wesley ruthlessly snaps off the bishop. You might be surprised that it was taken with the rook rather than the bishop, because the rook is worth more and can now be recaptured. However, in this position, the light squared bishop is an even stronger attacker than the rook. So Wesley chooses to keep it on the board to keep a pin active along the a4 e8 diagonal, as being shown by the green arrow. We're coming close to the end of the game here. Knight took the rook, and now queen e6 check with a double attack on the knight. Double attack. Wesley now attacks the exposed king by giving a check with the queen while also adding an attacker to the c6 knight. Black has no good way to respond. Knight e7, and Black chooses to block the check with the knight, trying to add defense to c6. Note that bishop takes c6 would win a piece because Black has queen c6, queen takes queen, knight takes c6 when Black holds on. Did I understand this while reading and not taking a look at the board? No, I didn't, so I have to do that again. Black chooses to block, I need to go here again. Black chooses to block the check with the knight, yes, block, trying to add defense to c6, the knight on c6. Note that 24, the next move, take with the bishop, would win a piece. Because Black has, wouldn't. That was the thing I overlooked. I was wondering why. Okay, so it was wouldn't. Sorry guys, my fault. I'm sorry. Okay, so then I understand. Okay, we continue. Bishop c5. Wesley continues to add firepower to the attack by bringing in yet another attacking piece. The dark squared bishop. From c5, it hits the pinned knight on e7. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, and finally Black had no more defense to do the dual threats of bishop takes e7 and bishop takes c6. All right. So, note that if Black does nothing, the threat is bishop takes c6, check, also attacking the queen. Queen needs to take, and we have a lovely checkmate. Okay, so then after bishop c5, Kasparov played rook c8. Kasparov chooses to defend against the checkmate, but allows a decisive capture on e7. That's what took place. Bishop takes the knight on e7. White wins the knight when it cannot be recaptured. Let's see why. The king clearly cannot recapture the bishop because White's queen guards it. The c6 knight cannot recapture because it's pinned. See, the bishop here pins the knight. Then 25, queen takes e7, leaves the rook hanging. 26, queen takes c8, and Black is getting mated after king f7, bishop b3, king f6, d6, and queen e6, and mate. Okay. So I have a short question to Jurica.
Yeah.
Jurica, this is a Blitz game, so I believe it was probably 3-0 or something? Or, yeah. So
Yeah.
you already anticipate my question here. Do you think that all this was calculated, or do they just intuitively move pieces, thinking those are looking good, and then thinking the rest?
Yeah, it's just like almost a perfect game. It's amazing game. It's shows why top players are top players. I mean, Black was Kasparov, probably arguably the best player of all time.
Yeah.
And Wesley played, of course, he's very good in openings. It's no question. Opening was perfect. Kasparov played weird opening from bishop g4, bishop d7. Basically, the way that Wesley punished just that. That's was perfect from moves like first of all pawn sacrifice, then move b4, queen b3, and then all the tactics later. Just amazing game, just perfect game. I mean, probably the thing is that he knew that he's better from that moment. That's also like also, of course, when you know the opening better than your opponent, I guess you can assume that you are better, and that gives you confidence to play, and of course to play on for an advantage. And of course he knew that he is much better, and he was trying to figure out how to use it. And even in Blitz, yeah, he's thinking extremely quickly, and he has extremely a lot of practice, of course, and just amazing game. Yeah, top game.
Okay,
amazing.
thank you. Okay.
That's my opinion, yeah, no problem.
And I have to tell you, I was so happy when I remembered, oh, it was a Blitz game. When we started, I was thinking like, how could my hero, Garry Kasparov, play that bad in the opening? Yeah, and then I thought, well...
That's a good question. That's a good question, yeah. I don't know how to answer. I don't know how to answer that, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, he was just later when he played his Blitz tournaments a few years ago, he's just not like he used to be.
Yeah.
But also, this is just one more thing. This is like a great example how quick they are thinking, like they're so strong, and they are still playing like very long games in classical chess. So we should enjoy that basically.
Yeah. Right. So we've finished this. What a masterful display from the start to finish by Wesley So. Flashier than most, this game is a beautiful example of how quickly you can crush your opponent if you follow opening principles and choose moves with purpose to further your attacking plans while stopping your opponent from carrying out their plans. To review, we've prepared a few exercises from this game. See if you remember and understand the key moves from this brilliant display by Wesley So. Oh, I'm so much looking to that review. Let's see if I remembered that. But before that, we go to the recap of the game by Danny, I believe. But first, I take a quick look here. Okay, that's all good. And we just continue.
Welcome to the Everything You Need to Know About Chess video series.
Oh, no.
In our final video installment, we get to go over one of the greatest chess games of all time.
So I just...
At this point, you've done it. You've earned it. You learned how to play the game, all about the opening, tactics, and strategy.
Let's go.
Welcome to the Everything You Need to Know About Chess video series. In our final video installment, we get to go over one of the greatest chess games of all time. At this point, you've done it. You've earned it. You learned how to play the game, all about the opening, tactics and strategy, and of course, even how to win endgames. But now it's time to bring it all together and show what it's like to play chess games at the highest level and win chess games in some of the most fun ways you could ever imagine. This game is one of the best examples of how to use all your pieces, how to sense the initiative, and how to bring everything together in the right tactical and strategic ways. This is the game between Wesley So and Garry Kasparov from the 2016 Ultimate Blitz Challenge. Wesley So was white and started with the move 1 knight f3, a move that is very good and similar to starting with moves like e4 or d4. It brings out a piece and controls the center, just like we taught you to do in the Everything You Need to Know About the Opening video of this series. Black played g6, and white actually played e4, transposing right back to a king-pawn game. After bishop g7 and d4, we see white grabbing control of the center in the most unapologetic fashion. You'll note that after the move bishop to g4, Garry Kasparov, of course considered by many to be one of the greatest players of all time, is also employing a strategy. While he's not necessarily controlling the center, he's fighting for the center by attacking it with the dark square bishop and then undermining the control white has by pinning the knight on f3. However, there's a gamble here, because if you give your opponent control over the most important area of the board, and you are not successful in undermining that control, it may backfire no matter how pretty your bishops might look on those diagonals. Wesley so played the move bishop to e2 to unpin the knight. We talk about developing with a purpose. This allows the knight to remain a forceful defender. And after knight to c6, Wesley played the move knight to d2. This move indirectly continues to defend the pawn on d4, because it says if you take my knight, I will take back with this knight, reinforcing protection and opening the queen. A knight replaces a knight. It also points out the tactic that if black takes on d4, white can capture, and black has no way to take both the bishop and the knight at the same time. Black would love to take here, but then you lose this piece. And if you take here, white has the very tricky recapture with the knight backward. Once again, white ends up at the end of that exchange up an entire minor piece. This means that despite the optics of how awkward the pieces look, Wesley has indeed successfully defended and held a huge central pawn advantage. After the move e5 from Kasparov, Wesley kicks the knight, and when the knight retreats, it's time to ask this bishop what it wants to do with h3. This is a critical moment, because as much as Garry Kasparov might not have wanted to capture on f3 with the knight, parting ways with one of the bishops, it might have been a better move than what he chose in the game. White, of course, would capture back with either the knight or the bishop and ultimately be in a slightly better position with more central control and more space, as we talked about, is something you want to shoot for in the opening. Kasparov, however, chose to back up the bishop, losing a full move. And you could argue, looking at this game in hindsight, that white already has the potential for a huge initiative and that Wesley So maybe played the most perfect game of chess to show how to use even a single tempo advantage. A tempo in chess is when you have the extra move. And if you can continue to use it, your opponent might be off balance and never recover. How do we use a space advantage when we have more squares than our opponent? As we said, squares lead to options and options lead to tactics. Tactics are how we win material and ultimately the game. And Wesley was ready to start giving his pieces even more squares with the move c5, exclam. It opens up the c4 square for the knight on d2. And if that knight on d2 can move, well, the queen is now reopened. Further, the bishop on c1 has an open diagonal. Sometimes one great thing can lead to many. And c5, while it does sacrifice a pawn, opens up so many more options for white. Black is already feeling the pressure. Kasparov took on c5, and Wesley So, sure enough, used that new square for the knight on c4. White is already threatening to win back material. Any random move by black would lose back the extra pawn, and with it, potentially the game, as white has a huge central advantage here, and no material to even show for it does black have. So instead, black played the move f6. The problem is that this move, while it holds onto the pawn, makes this bishop much worse. And from the principal perspective, many chess theoreticians would say that this move is even worse than the poison of losing the pawn, because you open up the squares around your king. And the only pieces that can never go backward are pawns. So once you weaken a diagonal, you can't ever fix it. Wesley doesn't need to be asked twice to seize this opportunity. He plays the awesome d6. This move attacks the knight and continues to thrive and strive for more options for the white pieces. Both the queen and the knight are involved in this party. If black takes on d6, white would take with check, forcing black to lose the right to castle, could even continue capturing pieces if he wants, and white is doing fantastic. Kasparov does not want to lose the right to castle. Of course, as we talked about in the opening video of this series, getting the king castled not only brings the king to safety, but connects the rooks. It's a huge goal that you can't give up on if you have any chance of shooting for it. So Kasparov instead retreats the knight. But after bishop to e3, another move with tempo attacking a pawn, b6, white shows that he can get castled. You can already look at a position where white has dominant and well-placed pieces. Even the queen on her original square is delivering pressure on the center. Black has pieces that haven't developed yet, others that are perhaps even worse than the original squares that they started on, and white is continuing to push. After the move bishop to c6, black threatens to take the pawn, so white trades on c7. Note that taking the queens off the board is not the best idea for black because this open file will be dominated by white. And with a pawn on c7 only one square away from getting a new queen, black is in huge trouble. So Kasparov took his chances in the middle game, keeping the queens on the board. He might have regret that he did. Because here comes Wesley So, showing that when you have active pieces, they aren't just there to look at. You have to continue to create options for them, continue to open lines to seize the opportunity before your opponent develops their knight and gets castled. White played the move b4 exclam, immediately threatening to capture twice. With a bishop on c5, white would have won back their sacrificed pawn and be controlling the idea for black to castle. Remember the rules, you cannot castle through check. Garry Kasparov is not excited about b takes c5 coming, so he takes a second pawn. But one measure of a good exchange, and in some cases a good sacrifice, is a very simple one. Does this exchange give my pieces more squares than they had before? This is a basic strategy and a critical thinking tip that can help you win chess games. Sometimes we don't know whether to trade pawn for pawn, knight for knight, bishop for bishop, or any other piece. But a very simple criteria should be asked. Does this exchange give my pieces more squares than they had before or less? And in this case, the removal of the c5 pawn gives white many more squares. And Wesley played rook to c1 to flex the muscles of the rook and show that the c file is his for the taking. The rook on the c file hits the bishop, the queen, and the knight, and truly shows that by giving up that b pawn, white has created more options for his army. Black is in a hurry to get developed with knight g to e7, preparing to castle and to defend the bishop, but Wesley has other plans. Queen to b3. This puts the queen on a diagonal, making it impossible for the black king to castle. Doing so would allow a discovered check from the queen, followed by a number of ways to win, from knight f7 to even taking on c6 and then ganging up on that pinned piece to the queen on c7. Kasparov decided he still had a chance to hold if he could just keep his king safe. He played the move h6, delaying castling and trying to slow play his way to a proper defense. But Wesley So was ready to strike. He plays rook fd1. Speaking of more options and more fun, all of white's pieces have become perfectly primed for good tactics to occur. After b5, it only takes a second to see that white has more potential than you could ever ask for in a chess game. If you'd like to pause the video to guess the combination from Wesley So, you can. But the move was knight c takes e5, and a brilliant one at that. By sacrificing this piece and opening up the file, white creates a new threat of the bishop capturing a pawn, especially given that the bishop on c6 is pinned to the queen on c7. Remember, when it comes to pins, the greater piece is hiding behind the pinned down piece, and you cannot afford to give up a queen for just a bishop. Kasparov plays rook to b8 to attack the bishop, and if anything shows the dominance of white's position, it might be this move more than any other. Wesley, rather than looking for anything forcing, retreats the bishop to a4. To take stock in this position, we see that the white queen prevents the black king from castling. Castling into check is not allowed. This bishop is quite literally a pawn, doing nothing but guarding e5, not playing in the game. Without getting castled, the rook might as well be off the board. The knight's only purpose to defend the c6 bishop is just that. Moving the knight anywhere else will actually open up the idea of the queen coming to e6 with check, with devastating consequences. The knight on c8 guards the knight on e7, which may be needed soon as white is bringing in more pieces, but otherwise is worse than the original developing square. The bishop is pinned to the queen. The queen is stuck where she stands guarding the bishop. And the rook, as much as it would love to come to b6 to help guard this pinned piece, would be captured if it ever did so. There's literally no moves black can play here to improve his position. He played the move queen to b7 to unpin the bishop in hopes to make a trade. But now the final combination occurs. This position shows that ultimately the threat is more powerful than the value of the pieces. To start a chess game, we say that the rook is worth 5 and the bishop is worth 3. But the strategic nature of any given position might tip the scales of the value a different direction. And this bishop is so powerful on this diagonal, especially when you consider that there's another piece operating on a diagonal with devious threats as well, that the right way to break through is not to capture with the bishop, now that the bishop is unpinned, but rather with the rook. Rook takes c6 forces knight takes c6, anything else, and the rook continues to gobble up with all kinds of discovered checks. Queen to e6 check follows. Note that this knight would love to retreat, but doing so is illegal. That is an absolute pin. And after the knight comes into e7, we see bishop to c5, and we freeze frame a position where white is down an entire rook, yet bishops are as dominant as you will ever see them on the board. The rook and queen control the only files that matter. A king is unable to get castled and get out of dodge in any fashion. There's an immediate threat on the board, if you move any piece, of bishop takes c6 with check, and after the queen moves, queen takes e7 would be checkmate. Because of that, black played the move rook to c8 to guard the knight, but after bishop takes e7, he's reminded that he has a new problem. While that rook may have moved to c8 to guard the knight, the only reason it could is because the queen protected it against the white queen on this diagonal. Bishop takes e7 truly overwhelms black for the last time. If you take with the queen, we have queen takes c8 with check, followed by winning the knight, and much more to follow. If you don't capture the bishop can move to any square next and continue the deadly checkmate attack. And of course, capturing with the knight is simply not legal due to the fact that the knight is pinned by the bishop on a4. Bishop takes e7 was played, and Garry Kasparov resigned on the spot, and Wesley So played one of the greatest chess games of all time. If this game doesn't get you excited in terms of how to win chess games, I'm not sure what will. Of course, there are many complete game examples, but using the center well, recognizing the initiative, understanding the concept that it's okay to make exchanges as long as these exchanges give your pieces more squares and more options, and then being relentlessly focused on your attack when the opportunity is there is exactly what Wesley So did to win this game. Finishing this video series is exactly what you have now done. You should feel proud and you should feel ready to go win chess games on chess.com. Congratulations for your hard work. We hope you enjoyed the training that comes along with the video, and we will see you around winning chess games on chess.com today.
Thank you, Danny. Wow, that was quite a nice explanation and repetition of what we just read. And before we go to our own course conclusion, like it's a review, not only learning, we do the final reviews, and I'm so curious if I'm able to make it. So let's continue and see what is the first review. Wesley So, top American Grandmaster, understands opening principles, and here plays the best move demonstrating optimal control of the center. What did he play? He played pawn to d4. Correct. Perfect. Occupying the center with 2 pawns gives white a great start to the game. Next variation. White's king is safe in the center for now. White's king is safe in the center for now, so castling immediately isn't strictly necessary. Wesley has a nice space advantage, and with his next aggressive move, takes even more space and gives one of his pieces a great square to come forward to. And that was pawn to c5, as we all remember from the text and the video. A fantastic idea, giving the d2 knight, the c4 square, to hop to as a more aggressive post. You don't always want to make so many pawn moves in the opening, but black has no immediate threats and his pawn move helps white develop. Think about it. The d2 knight needs to move in order for the dark squared bishop to develop. This one. So preparing the excellent c4 square for the knight facilitates queenside development. And it also makes the d file free, more or less free for the queen. Okay, also completed. These are easy. I thought it would be way more difficult. Let's see if Danny waited with the real difficult one for the final review number 3. After a dominant display of flawless opening and middle game strategy from Wesley, he arrived at this position in which all of black's pieces are tied down or out of the game. Wesley now brought one more piece into the attack to finish off Kasparov. How can white attack a pinned piece and overwhelm black's position? I read again. Wesley now brought one more.
Sorry, I need to interrupt. This one is probably the nicest one in the game. This one is very, very beautiful. The whole position is like amazing. So yeah, okay, now I will let you go on. But
okay.
This is like very beautiful. Yeah.
But I like it when you join in, and especially it seems that you are like really, really liking what Wesley so played here, and I was surprised.
This is a great game, amazing game.
Yeah,
seriously.
Yeah. I was surprised when Danny said it's one of the best games ever played.
Oh,
and especially
perfect game.
Yeah, and especially in a Blitz game. Yeah, so
yeah.
Okay, so how can white attack a pinned piece and overwhelms black's position? So which piece is pinned? It is the knight on e7 and the knight on c6. Both are pinned. And I should attack one. And I think it was the bishop move to c5. So let's see if I'm correct. Yes, I'm correct. Okay. So, white still to play. And here... what was it? No, not take, no. Do I remember this here? No. What did he play? That was the final one. Oh, I'm stupid. It was bishop takes e7. Yes. Correct. Okay, let's read the final part. White captures the bishop and black cannot recapture with the king, knight or queen. Let's see why. The king can't recapture because it's against the rules. The white queen is defending it. True. Then the knight can't recapture because it's pinned to the king of white's a4 bishop. Also true. And here we have the queen that takes. It's possible but leads to loss of further material. I can take the rook on c8. And even leads to checkmate after, again, we're going through it. Queen c8. Check. Needs to retreat. Then we have the bishop check. King needs to start a nice run. King f6. Then we have queen to c6. Queen goes in between. And here we have the final checkmate. Okay. Wesley understands that a good position leads to good tactics, and good tactics can lead to checkmating attacks. It's easy to say, but difficult to master. But if defeating the likes of former world champion Garry Kasparov isn't evidence of mastery, I don't know what is. Very nice. Okay. So we have a next variation and go to the course conclusion. I guess that's what Danny already said in the video. Congratulations, you finished the entire course and now know all there is to know about chess. I somehow doubt this. I understand what he means, but yeah. So, well, okay, maybe not. He was kidding. Okay. Mastering the game takes years of study and practice. Even the world chess champion himself will tell you that he's still working to improve. Okay. And by reading this, I'm really happy because I don't know if you notice, earlier on I tried to calm down the beginner players here, as if I would be a beginner player and would go through this material and thinking, well, they expect me to know to understand all of it, to find all of it by myself, etc., I would probably just skip playing chess at all because it's way over my head and I don't know. But it's really nice to see Danny now saying it's all okay if you don't know all about chess and still have trouble finding these things because you still need practice. Okay. But with this course, you're off to a strong start. Here's what we recommend to keep improving. Keep practicing tactics. Yeah, and I noticed, I know Juritsa now for 2.5 months, I think, and I still remember when we talked about stuff, he said it's all tactics, 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 and I was like, okay. So here it's repeated. Tactics are the keys to winning chess games. For your next Chessable course, we recommend 1001 chess exercises for beginners, where popular streamer Fiona Style Antoni will introduce and guide you through every tactic you need to know. You can practice chess.com's puzzle feature or through many Chessable courses. Right. So I don't know if we are going to cover the 1001 chess exercises for beginners next, but we for sure will continue with the series that we are just taking more Chessable courses and go through it like we did here. I think it's really educational. It's wonderful that chess.com gives these free courses. Basically, this to me was really a full course. Yeah, but usually they have a course and they give a part of it away as a free course. So just as an incentive to see what it is like, and then if you like it, to buy, of course, the full course. So we will take a look at those courses too in the future. Okay. Study other Chessable courses. There are courses on virtually every part of the game, from openings to endgames, taught by the best players and coaches in the world. Check out more courses using the link below. And play games. Yes, highly recommended. It's important to put what you learn into practice. Chess is very much like a sport. It's not just about what you know. It's also about keeping sharp and putting your skills to the test. You can play games live on chess.com and against bots. And here comes something where I think I'm not a chess teacher. I'm an ordinary guy trying to play chess, sometimes trying to play good chess, sometimes just moving pieces because being too lazy. But I would, from my point of view, highly recommend, if you play games, not just play the games, but especially take a look at your games where you lost and try to analyze by yourself, find out, why did I lose? So if you then noticed why you lose, you know your errors and mistakes and can try to prevent them for next time, and that way you just get better. Otherwise it's just playing without improving. Okay, and most of all, have fun. Chess is full of wild, elegant, exciting, creative and endless possibilities no matter what your level. Remember to enjoy the journey. Now that's a coincidence, it really is, because our channel is called Chess Under Fire, a learning experience or learning journey, isn't it? Yeah. Mm. So, so note, if you'd like to study this course again for optimal functionality, we recommend using the delete my progress option in chapter options before doing so. Okay, then you would start right away. Here we have helpful links to chess.com, and we continue and should get congratulations. You finished learning the whole course. Okay, so my review of the course, I would have never expected to spend 2, 4, 6, 9 hours on the course. It was being shown with 1 hour 50 minutes video, and we had 5 chapters. So I thought, as this is beginner stuff, I can just rush through it, we'll know everything, and we'll be happy that we got this over with, more or less. But it was very different. In the first chapter, where I learned everything about the pieces and chess basic rules and so on, it was really boring to me because I knew basically everything. But then it built up, and there were little pieces that I still didn't know. Just take a look at the outpost for the piece. Then we had the knight check moves for the queen and king mating pattern, if that's a pattern. So then again for the rook with the chess with the knight position. So there were little bits where I really thought, well, I can take that away from this course, and so I enjoyed it a lot more, and especially the last part here, bringing it all together with the game from Wesley and Garry Kasparov. It was just amazing, and I still feel like I'm a chess baby, which I probably am anyway. Yeah, and for me, it's a lot about not only winning, but also just learning, and also sometimes about being mad at myself. Then I usually laugh why I could have overseen this easy move. And so basically, chess is a lot of fun to me in all its different shades it comes. Yeah, and Danny did a very good job in presenting the videos, of course. I believe he also put together the material. I understood everything. There were not a lot of errors. I noticed there was a typo, probably like black is resigning, white is resigning while black resigned. And so there was a lot, and it's just all good. Highly recommended to beginners. They can go through the course without a teacher. They can go through the course now with our video here, with additional explanations, and just seeing how does someone else go through such a course. I'm a member of the Chess Dojo, and it's another online learning community, I'd say, where you can exchange your ideas, your experiences with other chess players. And I know that some just go through the videos and are happy. Some just go through the text that is presented here. Some do both, like I do. And some don't do the reviews and then are mad that they are presented with 100 reviews in one session and are being turned down by them. So I also highly recommend, if you have reviews to do, then just do the reviews. Yeah, so you don't pile up a lot of stuff where you say, well, it's too much and I don't do it anyway then. Okay, so yeah, that is my review. Is there anything else I'd like to say? Yeah, the gamification. I, of course, will take a look at the gamification. What is my place after I finish the whole course? Yeah, so Jurica, do you have something to say?
Well, thank you very much Jan, for your time. First of all, for your effort. It was, I think, very educational for most of the people, actually, chess players who are just started to play, or who doesn't even know how to move pieces, for everybody. And you covered all of topics in this all 4 parts. So thank you very much for that, for doing the hard job, but
Mhm.
making life easier for a lot of people. I think it's just very easy and nice way to learn. Just watch, and yeah, like even more easy. Just yeah, nothing to do. Basically, just learn, listen, and watch, listen, and learn. Basically. So thank you for that. And yeah, I was here all the time trying to help. Also, yeah. So thank you very much again, and will be maybe more material like this in the future also, of course,
Yeah.
from us.
Okay, and I have to tell you, I was so surprised when you said, "Well, I can join your streams," and I would have never expected you to join a beginner's course, because I think it must have been so boring for you. But so yeah, thank you, Jurica, for joining. It made my life easier here
Well,
on this
yeah,
side.
but some on the other hand, some things like this game, last game that we just saw was
Mm.
like educational even for me, of course,
Mm.
like a lot, and very very amusing also.
Mm.
So yeah, for almost everybody, as I said,
Mm.
it's I think very educational to
Okay.
see
Mm.
what is here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then we continue because I wanted to see where was my place in the leaderboard at the end. Okay, I made it to number 600, or place number 630 with 24,000 points. And again, Cold Free Octopus, C3 Line, Andrew Schulz, and they must have reviewed the course over and over. And I believe if you're a beginner, you can go through it several times and will then just add up points and make your way on the leaderboard, of course. Okay, so do I have revisions? Yeah, in 1 hour and 14 minutes, Chessable will notify me that I have to do my review session. Okay, so it's always good to being pushed. And there's one final thing I'd like to let you know, and it is that it's not here. It was, there it is. Get the app. As I'm a German, native German speaker, I just received an email, a newsletter by Chessable that their app is now also available in German. So all German beginners and chess players just get the app and start playing that. And final reminder, neither Jurica or I are affiliated with Chessable today, and we have no relatives working at Chessable. And Chessable didn't pay us any money for doing this review, because sometimes I think if you praise it so much, people might think, yeah, they are bored and they just tell what Chessable likes them to tell. But this is really an independent review, and it's just something that we liked. So, yeah, with this, we close the Everything You Need to Know About Chess review and learning session. It was 4 parts. Yeah, let us know in the comments what you think of it, what courses you'd like us to cover next, and have a good night. Okay, thank you guys. Bye-bye.